Well, the budget blueprint is out, but it looks like deficits are still in. The White House says it's a win because it doesn't add to the deficit. But former CBO Director Doug Holtz-Eakin says we're just pushing off our debt problem. Douglas Holtz-Eakin, $4 trillion spending. You know, listen, President Trump increased defense spending, and he offset it with cuts, long-needed cuts, by the way, to some of these over-bloated government agencies. But you're a purist. You've seen this from the inside, and you think it's time that we tackle our overall debt here.
Yeah, I mean, this is not a complete budget. There aren't any economic assumptions. We don't see the tax proposals. And most importantly, it leaves out entirely the mandatory spending programs, the so-called entitlements. And those are the programs that are driving us to trillion-dollar deficits over the next 8 years or so. If we're going to tackle the debt problem, you can't restrict yourself to the 30% of spending, which is in this particular proposal. Now, I think when people look at it, they're going to agree we need to spend more on the men and women who are in armed services. I think there's no disagreement about that. But they're offsetting it with cuts that historically have been hard to achieve, and some of which are going to get bipartisan protection. I think if you start cutting $6 billion out of the National Institutes of Health, you're going to have some Republicans unhappy about that as well. So I'm not sure they'll get to 54, and I'd much rather see them get serious about the parts of the budget where the real money is.
Well, you're talking to 70% of the budget that are so-called entitlements, although when we use those terms, the audience, I get a deluge of emails and tweets saying, hey, I've worked for that money. It's not an entitlement. I put money in Social Security. I put money into Medicare. They took it out of my paycheck. Why would he tinker with that?
So that we get programs people can be proud of. Right now, the promise in Social Security is that you'll have your benefits cut 25% across the board while you're in retirement somewhere in the next 20 years. That is no way to run a pension program. That's not a pension program America should be proud of. So let's get a Social Security system that isn't bleeding red ink, and you can actually rely on your retirement benefits. You can say the same thing about Medicare, where we spend an enormous amount of money on health care for seniors and don't get high-quality results. You can say the same thing about Medicaid, which the House or the Hill Republicans are actually looking at reforming, because low-income Americans, yeah, they get an insurance policy, but they can't actually go see a doctor. So it's not just about the money. It's that these are the programs that people want to rely on, and they can't. We need better programs.
But then when you say to the American public, hey, you know what, we want to do reform, and it has nothing to do with coverage, just move the retirement age to 67. You know, it gets politicized, and it's a third rail of politics, and it doesn't go through. I'm with you that ultimately it's going to, you know, build into something that that we can't fix. But so how do you get that through?
I agree with you that that has been the historical sort of way politics played out, but you know, the old rule is if something has to change, it will. It has to change. There's no more money. We already have an enormous amount of debt, and it's set to spiral. If you literally go out to 2024 at the end of what would be 2 terms of President Trump, if we don't change the trajectory, the second largest spending program in the federal budget will be interest on previous borrowing. It'll be bigger than the Pentagon. It'll be bigger than Medicare. It'll be bigger than Medicaid. That's not a sensible way to run things, and so we will have to change course. And to change course, the politics will have to be different. You will be doing a favor to the American people to shore up Social Security or fix Medicare or fix Medicaid. That's the bottom line.
A lot of fiscally conservative Republicans that I know that were really adamant about this are now saying, hey, you know what, with the new Trump agenda, you know, get rid of these regulations, lower taxes, reinvigorate the American spirit. A lot of evidence already showing that it's already beginning to happen. You get that supply side effect, and that no economist, particularly the CBO, taking into account the velocity of money and what that means not only for our economy but for the Treasury, and saying that, you know, so the focus should be on growing the economy first, reinvigorating this economy, and then addressing those issues that you're talking about right now.
Yeah, I mean, amen. I mean, we do need to grow much more rapidly. That is exactly the top priority at this time. You and I both know there's no way we'll address Social Security reform, Medicare reform, anything on those big social safety net programs if we're in a recession. So let's get a better economy, an important step. It's the quickest way to raise the prosperity in the middle class, but it won't solve these problems by itself. It's a crucial part of the equation, but you still need to do some serious work on the structure of these programs.
Doug, we're $20 trillion in debt right now. How much do we need to lower it? Because I don't think anyone watching thinks we'll ever get rid of it all. So how much do we need to lower it to sort of sidestep the risk that you're concerned about?
Yeah, I think realistically, you want to look at debt as a fraction of the economy, so debt relative to GDP. We still have a problem. It's high and going higher. It could be aiming toward 90%. So I think the number one thing is you stop the increase. And then number two, you started on a downward trajectory. You send the signal to world capital markets that the U.S. is not going to run itself into the ditch, that it's climbing out of the ditch, and this is going down. How fast it goes down, I think, is less important than getting it going in the right direction. And that's hard enough work, so I'd be really happy to see that happen.
With interest rates going up, too, some of that's going to be unavoidable, right?
Yes, but the good news here is interest rates are going up because the economy is getting better. That's the right reason for rates to rise. This isn't the Fed being ahead of the curve and preemptively trying to slow the economy. This is the Fed trying to catch up with the reality. So that's okay for me.
All right, before I let you go, does Big Bird make it? Does Big Bird survive?
Yes. You know, we've seen this symbolic war before. We know how it ends. I wouldn't have picked this fight, but here we go.
All right, Douglas Holtz-Eakin. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.